Today we're diving into a crisis that nearly brought the global economy to its knees, the 2026 Strait of Hormuz crisis. It's a story about how one of the world's most critical energy arteries got completely sealed off. And we're going to break down exactly how it all went down. So let's start with a number, 25%. No, what's that? Well, that's how much of the entire world's seaborne oil trade used to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. And then in early 2026, it just stopped, almost overnight. And I mean, the speed of this collapse was just staggering. Look at this. On February 28th, everything's fine, business as usual. Just one day later, traffic plummets by 70%. And by March 2nd, we're talking just 48 hours later, it's practically zero. The world's busiest oil choke point was slammed shut. So the big question is, how on earth did this happen? How did these simmering tensions in the region just explode into a full-blown crisis that stopped the global economy in its tracks? It all comes back to a single, decisive military strike. Here's where it all kicked off. On February 28th, the United States and Israel launched this coordinated series of airstrikes. It was codenamed Operation Epic Fury. Now, their stated goal was to take out Iran's military and nuclear sites. But as you'll see, it did a whole lot more than that. And this was the point of no return. The operation killed Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. For Iran, this was an absolute act of war. There was no coming back from this, and it guaranteed their response would be fast and incredibly severe. So Iran's retaliation wasn't just a simple tit-for-tat military strike. Oh no. It was this really sophisticated, multi-layered strategy. It was designed to turn the geography of the Strait of Hormuz into a weapon. They came at it from 4 different angles. First, you had direct physical attacks. They used everything, small boats, missiles, drones, to go after commercial ships. Then they laid sea mines, creating this invisible, terrifying threat lurking just below the surface. On top of that, they waged electronic warfare, spoofing satellite signals to throw ships off course. And finally, the 4th prong, economic pressure. By making the strait a war zone, insurance costs went through the roof, making it just too expensive to even think about passing through. And let's be clear, this wasn't some abstract threat. These were real attacks with real consequences. Just look at this list. It's only a handful of examples. Ships were set on fire, they were sunk, they were abandoned. Take the Musafa 2, a tugboat from the UAE. It sank and 4 crew members died. The MT Skylight had to be abandoned after 2 of its crew were killed. The point is, this was a violent, deadly campaign. There was a very real human cost. And of course, that kind of violence doesn't just stay in one place. It immediately sent shockwaves rippling outwards, hitting the wallets of people thousands of miles away. The closure of the strait triggered a massive global economic panic. You can see it right here with oil prices. The effect was immediate and just dramatic. Before the crisis, Brent crude was trading for less than $100 a barrel. By March 8th, it shot past that mark, and it didn't stop until it hit a peak of $126. Analysts said the price surged faster than it did during any other recent conflict. And this quote from Qatar's energy minister really captures the feeling at the time. He said it on March 6th. This will bring down economies of the world. He saw exactly what was happening. The Gulf's biggest energy producers were being cut off, and he knew the consequences for everyone, everywhere, were going to be catastrophic. But here's the thing so many people forget. It wasn't just about oil. The strait is a critical highway for so many other things. 30% of the world's traded fertilizers, the stuff we need to grow food, went through there. 20% of global aluminum exports, 1/5 of the world's liquefied natural gas, and get this, 1/3 of global helium production was hit. And that affects everything from hospital MRIs to the chips in your phone. Okay, so with the global economy basically in freefall, the crisis quickly morphed. It went from being a regional blockade to a direct and really, really dangerous standoff between the United States and Iran. And what came next was this super confusing and perilous situation of dueling blockades. You had Iran saying the strait was closed to any ship connected to the US, Israel, or their allies. Then, in response, the US announced its own blockade, but only on ships going to or from Iranian ports. They claimed they were protecting freedom of navigation for everyone else. It was basically a high-stakes game of chicken on the high seas. People tried to talk, right? But diplomacy just couldn't keep up. A ceasefire was agreed to on April 8th, but it was almost immediately torpedoed when Iran started charging these insane million-dollar-plus tolls just for passage. 4 days later, peace talks totally collapsed. The very next day, the U.S. announced its blockade. And by April 18th, that fragile peace was gone, and Iran slammed the door on the strait all over again. And that pretty much brings us to the messy aftermath. Even after the immediate fighting stopped, the damage, both economic and human, was just immense. The Straits was still a hotly contested space, and that vital artery was still severed. And this last number really brings us full circle, back to the human cost. 20,000. That was the estimated number of sailors, of mariners, who were just stranded on about 2,000 ships trapped inside the Persian Gulf. They couldn't get out. Their ships had become floating prisons. So the takeaways here are pretty stark. You had thousands of ships and their crews just trapped. The blockade itself was a clear violation of international maritime law. It caused the biggest shock to the world's energy supply since the 1970s. And the fallout, both for the global economy and for the people caught in the middle, was nowhere near over. And all of this leaves us with a really fundamental question. Now, this specific crisis was fictional, but it shines a huge spotlight on a very real vulnerability in our world. When a choke point like the Strait of Hormuz gets shut down, who has the right to open it back up? Or maybe who has the power? Is it about international law? Is it about economic need? Or does it just come down to pure military might? That remains the big, unresolved question at the heart of it all.